Okay, welcome back to Ethics TV. This is the first show of 2025, and my first guest of the first show in first of 2025 is Brett Mowry. Welcome. What is keeping you busy and excited right now?
There's a couple things right now. I have all my regular work that I do around AI governance and working through that, which I've been doing for a number of years, which is always exciting. But over the last year, I've been working with an organization called AI2030 and building out their responsible AI pledge program. So, the idea there is to essentially set out the foundational and achievable commitments that a company can make to be responsible with AI. And ultimately it becomes we think it's relatively simple in its you need to select a framework, and we've done the work to understand what the frameworks are. There's a lot out there now. 5 or 6 years ago there was very few, but looking at those, engaging stakeholders, upskilling workers, implementing governance, and then ultimately monitoring. So, just kind of pulling those things together, from this commitment, approach for this pledge, putting together a program behind that you do maturity assessments, things like that really are getting companies excited about. I think has been, it's been interesting, even maybe the last year and a half or so, what the evolution that has happened from AI's new, generative AI, like those kind of things, right? Like that's the new thing. To people not knowing what it is, testing into it, but then not really understanding what responsibility means. And so, there's been a lot of progress there where I can see it starting to kind of come together in companies doing that. I'll say briefly, the other exciting thing that I'm doing as sort of a side project is I'm going back to school for public policy. I kind of realized as I was going through a lot of what I was doing in my regular job, trying to build these public and private partnerships, didn't quite have the language, for the public policy side and understanding that. So been doing a lot of, night classes at University of Chicago, getting a master's degree there, which is, interesting at my point in life, but been really fun, building out a network in the space, on the whole, public, service, public sector side. So.
Wow, that's really cool. And when anyone says public policy, it sounds very much like politics. So how are you managing to swerve the political route, the Washington, D.C. version of public policy? How close to the politics do you get there?
Well, so I'm a little bit new to it. I just started last year in these courses. So, I'm doing a lot of learning. I haven't delved in too directly yet, but I think that's hopefully that's a bit of my goal is to get more into that. Like the nice thing where I'm going, we have like an Institute of Politics, so I can meet with the fellows that they bring in that are like in the U.S. here, you know you know former senators, mayoral candidates. We had, Chuck Todd, who in the U.S. ran Meet the Press TV show. You got to meet these people that are really in it, and they have seminars, and you really get a feel for kind of what happens in that space. And it's eye opening in a lot of ways, and I think give me a great perspective of what you need to do to kind of bring the public sector side and the private sector side together.
Yeah, that's really cool. And trying to make a bridge here between the AI side and the public policy side, do you feel that there's a call to arms that's happening to some extent that moves towards policy that's drafted around, let's say, ethical human rights or moralistic values rather than kind of gently guiding organizations in a pledge? Do you feel that there's an imminent or needed public policy agenda of responsible AI?
I do. That connection to the pledge that you're drawing is interesting in that, even as we started the work towards this pledge program, like the EU AI Act was coming out, right around that time where it was kind of really being, formed. In the U.S., it's going to be whatever happens, it's going to be different. It's very state led. There's a lot going on, in various parts of the state. We're not sure what's going to happen in the federal. And we have a new administration coming, so we're still not. We're much less sure, for another couple of weeks at least. But the reality is that there's going to be a lot of different policies. I'm thinking a little more U.S. And you can add in Europe as well that you need to meet, but those are going to come out over time. And really, with the pledge, it's more the foundational mindset. We get into like values frameworks and things like that, like setting up the values for your company that incorporate how you're looking at AI. So it just becomes more of your culture, like those kind of things. Whereas policies are going to be obviously very specific. You get much more of a legal perspective, that kind of starts to come out of those as well. But but they're ultimately, when I look at like the framework we use at AI2030 as well, there's accountability, as one of the key tenets. So there are going to be areas where you need to really have policy that a pledge in itself is not going to do it, but knowing that there's going to be just time and different perspectives in the policies themselves. The pledge kind of at minimum fills in that gap along the way and gets you ahead as those policies come in.
Do you feel that that there is a way of limiting the risk of policy stroke guidance not moving as fast as the speed of innovation? How does one mitigate the risk of the difference in speed?
Yeah. I mean, innovation is going to happen faster than policy. I think it always has. You talk to the policymakers; they know it, and that's where we kind of look at that from that perspective of, again, going back to a little bit what I just said, like your company values frameworks. The understanding of what you're doing as you get into like some of the work that I do is around data bias and bias, AI fairness and that kind of work. Just understanding that world to start off with through like your organization, prioritizing that, is huge in getting you ahead as you're doing these innovations. Like there's now starting to be a lot of cases out there where companies, are showing that you can do both. You can innovate and be responsible. And really, if you want to be sustainable long term, you need to do both. There's going to be, there's stuff starting to happen in the U.S. like legal cases, et cetera, that will be TBD. Large enough companies may be able to kind of get through those, but if you're not those large companies, you need to make sure that you're not getting caught up in something that you could have avoided. And that's where the sustainability of your business comes in. You're automating everything with AI, and you need to know and be responsible with it.
What do you feel about the kind of, let's say, more hysterical viewpoints from the marketplace, like the Sam Harris's of the world, who state a kind of existential risk of AI, and it's not just kind of like this is the thing that's going to come and take over our jobs, but what happens when artificial intelligence, AGI, demands its own rights and its own rules and wants to run for public office? And how do you feel about those kind of the more hyperbolic statements of risk?
Yeah, I mean, I maybe waver a little bit back and forth, but ultimately, I don't really see those broader existential risks. I worry more about the maybe not even near term risks, but the automation of our inherent biases, and like when we get into kind of like the future, the future state where like I feel lucky that I grew up in a world without AI and I had to learn stuff a little bit more on my own. And even now, as I go back to school, which I mentioned, I'm able to like use AI, but also have those critical thinking skills because I had to develop those over the years. So like those are those areas where I more worry about how our society, starts to really understand, I guess continues to understand really what's behind AI. Like there's I think a general lack of knowledge of the type of information that's there, the bias in that data, and really where that kind of leads us. We've already seen social media kind of pass us down a path that with algorithms that can start to kind of polarize as well. And so I think I don't know that I mean that's to me a pretty big thing ultimately, right? But the AI, I feel that there's at least going to be some good oversight of AI and controls there that will kind of ensure that we're keeping you know, control, I guess, of the AI itself. But there may just be a smaller group that starts to even really truly understand what AI is doing and has more power, throughout the world, based off of that.
From your human behavior perspective, and when we speak about biases and heuristics and the way that we decide, have you ever looked at the terminology of artificial intelligence and thought, it would appear that the engineers of the world have labeled intelligence in one of the two ways that intelligence could be taxonomically described. The other way that intelligence could be described is through emotional intelligence. Inside that emotional intelligence part, there are nuances which are fundamentally different decision-making criteria than in the logical intelligence. From your human behavior leaning, I would imagine that you may have flagged that as a interesting taxonomy, because it would appear the technologists of the world don't see the difference between intelligence logically or emotionally. They say, these machines will be smarter than humans. It's like, okay, they may be logically smarter, as in be able to calculate 13 times 14.2 faster than humans, but emotionally intelligent in terms of understanding with empathy someone's feeling of not being good enough is something which is abstracted away from logical intelligence. And I wonder whether artificial intelligence has somehow hijacked the term intelligence and tried to coerce it to purely be logical, which is not even half of how humans actually operate. Has that ever kind of come across your mind?
Yeah. That's a great articulation of it. I admittedly probably hadn't broke it out to that specificity, but I do see that though. The way these are being set up, the AI is being set up. A chatbot as a basic example, right? It's being presented as a human, right? So there is that natural interaction that you start to have with it, and I know there's already legal cases in the U.S. With building relationships with AI and that sort of thing. So that to your point, when there's really no emotion behind that, it's all data. There's I'm sure someone is saying that they can train empathy, and there are ways that again, a chatbot, the response comes back in an empathetic form per se.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think where it comes to where my mind goes to with that is it goes a little bit back to the accountability of it, and ultimately, who when a chatbot, continuing the basic example, responds in a way that's empathetic or not, like who's responsible for that, and how do you ensure that that's done in a way that both why that empathy is there, not like that explainability, but then also the person using it continually make sure that they understand that this is not a human that they're talking to, right?
Yeah, and that's an interesting paradigm, isn't it? Because in that way, one of the, arguably from a human behavioral psychological standpoint, one could say that when compassion and empathy and sympathy is constructed in our heads, the warmer the relationship the greater the score in terms of authenticity and integrity is. And if there is absolutely categorically no authenticity because we know that this is a staged environment, it is a bit like wanting to have a deep and meaningful relationship with a prostitute. We know for sure that there's 100% not that type of emotional transactional relationship in the setup. And so then to feign it would be inauthentic to a point of extraordinary unlikelihood of real relationship. And I'm wondering whether there's, in terms of our responsibility angle of how to make AI more ethically just, I'm wondering how much work there's been so far on the level of authenticity and transparency of the way machines are programmed and the way the companies are using the AI. Is that, would you say that that's already on the agenda in terms of ethical responsibility?
Yeah, no, I think it is. Here as you kind of describe that, as many of us know, like AI all starts with the data. So when I think of authenticity, it may be very authentic to me because it's built off of data that's authentic to me. It connects to me in some form, that data that was scraped off the internet or whatnot. But the another ethnicity, another someone else with a different background, it may not be authentic at all. And so there becomes those kind of that dichotomy, I guess, for lack of a better word, that it really, and that goes back to biases and the bias in the data and the representativeness of that data itself as to how authentic something can be, because it's somewhat authentic in the eye of the user, right? And that's going to be very unique. So I do think right now it's, I think the underlying data is pretty biased, from where it's collected. And those models, that from that side continue to be biased, and I think that's where that responsibility comes, is to if this becomes our source of information in the future, do we lose a lot of that authenticity from many cultures in our world right now?
Yeah, that's a good point. And so in your work in the AI 2030, what would you say if this were an advertising pitch for what you're doing in AI 2030? What would you say companies should do that are listening to this if they want to get in touch? Who should get in touch with what you're doing, or where should they go, or what's the action point that people could take from this? If what you've been saying is resonating with someone who's watching or listening, what should they do next?
Can always reach out to me on this, within our program, the Responsible AI Pledge program. Really, when we think about AI 2030 overall, we think of it pretty much as we're trying to create a movement as much as anything, right? Like, we're not waiting to your question on policy. We're not waiting for that. We do feel that there's, we have, I think, about 2,000 members already. So within about a year and a half, and these are like responsible AI leaders who are some of them in the weeds, some of them are, board members, that really want to, they understand that, to the ethics of this, that it's pretty big, and they need to kind of start it now. So, start now is the biggest thing, right? Like beyond this pledge program, we also are doing things like leadership training in responsible AI. We're bringing up a board of directors training, like these additional programs that can, really, set companies ahead. That this is obviously like $1 trillion industry kind of coming here, and companies they need to make those innovations, and they need to do it now. So, and you need to think ethically, think responsibly from the beginning. So that's what we're trying to ensure and help companies do.
That's good. Well, I salute to you and your efforts, and I'm really sure that we'll be speaking again. And what's more so is that I hope that anyone who's watching this or listening to this can go onto the links. I've included all links and your bio and stuff in the description below. So yeah, when everyone needs to get in touch, they know exactly what to do. So Brett, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. It was great to be here. It's great to have a chat. Look forward to doing it again.
You will. Cheers.